Hi there, everybody. This is going to be exciting. I want to introduce you to my good friend, Jerry Collette. Jerry is one amazing human being, and he's going to share something really, really special with us. I think it's wonderful, and I think it heals lives, it restores lives, you can unfold love. It's marvelous. Hi, Jerry. Thanks for coming on the call.
Oh, thank you, Keith. It's great to be on with you again.
Right. So, first of all, I want to tell people what we're going to do. And we're going to look at a couple of, let's call them processes. You know, it's healing. I sometimes call these hacks, you know, like ways of doing things that changes how you feel, how you think. And we're going to look at one particularly called Healing the Me I See in You. You'll explain more of that in a minute, but I think that's a great idea. I realized many years ago that if you go bitching on about somebody, it's probably your own stuff. In fact, I wrote an essay called "We're All Talking About Ourselves." You know, whatever a person is hammering on about, it's their own stuff inside. And I know you've come to that from a separate pathway too. So tell us a little bit about, one of the things you can share, if you would, is tell us about yourself, and then we'll go on to the background for the process. Just a little bit, how come you came to be a wonderful, healing human being, Jerry?
Well, Keith, I recognized when I was a teenager that I was quite messed up. I got an assignment when I was 15 years old to do a book report on a book called Man's Search for Meaning by
Viktor Frankl.
Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish psychiatrist who was captured by the Nazis and was in a prison camp, and he survived. And he also noted who didn't survive throughout this ordeal. And it wasn't just the prisoners that were dying. Sometimes the Nazis would shoot each other for lighting a cigarette out of the wrong side of the mouth, or Lord knows what, just because the guy was not mad and took it out on somebody. But what he tended to find was that people who had meaning in their life survived, and the people without meaning, as soon as they lost meaning, would die. And at 15 years old, and I'm 66 now, so, you know, we're talking about 50 years now. And I realized then that the futures that were being presented to me that I was looking at, and the ones that were suggested to me by my elders, and the life I was living didn't really have that much meaning. And so I went on a quest. And, you know, we're going back now to the 60s. And, you know, there weren't a lot. You go into a bookstore now, and there are racks and racks and racks of things about self-help and alternative ways of looking at the world. Back then, a lot of times you go in the bookstore, and there's like maybe a foot of it. And I just quested everything I could find, and I dug and I dug and I dug. And probably the really first big thing I came into was transactional analysis. And are you familiar with the I'm okay, you're okay, corral?
Yeah.
With the four positions. And then the parent, child, adult, Eric Berne, who was quite a genius and way ahead of his time, but actually died very young. But to this day, I still use a lot of that stuff from games people play, and I'm okay, you're okay to this day. And there's some wonderful, another Born to Win is another great transactional analysis. So, you know, I studied one thing, I studied another, I studied a bunch of other things, and different things work. Some things work to various degrees. Like I used to say sometimes, you know, I've done a lot of work on myself, and some of it worked. And I started to distill what was the things that worked the best and what didn't. And one of the things I figured out, because I was also doing pastoral counseling with other people in the process of trying to learn this, I actually helped some other people in the process of doing stuff too. I found one of the big things that really made a difference was forgiveness. And of course, people tend to think of forgiveness in the West differently than like Jesus used when his disciples would think of it. For example, we think of forgiveness in the West as pardoning somebody. Yeah. Whereas,
well, letting them get away with it, Jerry. Isn't that a common mentality? It's letting them get away with it. They should be punished. They should pay for it. If I forgive them, they'll get away with it.
Yes. Well, if you look back, for example, at the way the Aramaics, and Jesus and his disciples all spoke Aramaic, even though the Bible was written in Greek. So the in the Aramaic concept of forgiveness, for example, if you did something to me that I considered a transgression, and I just let you off the hook for it, but I continued to hold the grudge, I may have pardoned you, but I've done zero forgiveness.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other hand, if I let go of the grudge, but I ask you to make restitution and make it right, I've forgiven, but I haven't pardoned. And so the idea of letting go, some people call it the charge or the buildup or the resentment or the grudge, is all, but charge is kind of a universal word that kind of, you know, goes beyond just resentments and grudges. Mm-hmm. But by letting go of that stuff, that's the real, where the forgiveness comes in.
Right. And the person that gets healed is you, isn't it? It's you that gets healed. Never mind the guy that perpetrated the transgression. It's you that gets released. That's exactly another point that's missed.
Pardon me. So in the process of looking at all these things, I put various pieces together and put together what's called the inner peace process. And that came from the work from a mentor that both you and I share, Bob Ross.
Right.
He had a process that had a lot more pieces to it. He had this little core piece, and I thought that was the gem.
Yes.
So I started with Bob's core. I tweaked a little bit, which I can get into in more detail. And then after working with the inner peace process for a number of years with a number of people and myself, I found out that for a lot of people, it was a little too deep for them to jump into right off the bat. Yeah. So that's when, it's with some experimentation, I came up with the Healing the Me I See in You, which is an easier, lighter process. And instead of focusing on what's wrong with me, you focus on what's wrong with somebody else. But what you're usually finding is wrong with somebody else is where the healing is.
Right, back to, we're all talking about ourselves, of course. Just a couple of sentences about our dear brother, Bob Ross, the late Bob Ross. He's no longer with us. Marvellous person, wasn't he? And as you say, he brought us together from different paths just because of Bob's seminal pioneering work. Wonderful.
I tell you, he had so many insights. And, you know, the one that he always loved to talk about was the guy that turned the cats into alcoholics and then cured them. And
yes, what was his name? Yeah.
Was it Korzybski or is that somebody else?
No. What on earth was it? I was going to say Pottinger's cats. That's a different... oh, gosh, I can't remember his name. I'll post it with the video, folks. Or I can do an overlay.
And it's something you probably couldn't do today because the people of ethical treatment of animals and the like would get all upset that, you know, you would do something like that. But it was amazingly insightful what this guy was able to accomplish doing that. Yeah.
I mean, I thought what was really cute with those experiments, the cats ended up with a taste for alcohol. And the cats were doing happy hour to get over their stresses, do you remember?
Yes, but once he got them over their stresses, they gave up the alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
That was, to me, the great part about it is, and, you know, they didn't have to go through any steps. They just had to let go of the stress in their life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the thing about so much of the substances that people are using, and now, you know, substance abuse was rampant back in the 60s, and it's still rampant now, although it's more prescription-oriented. I always refer to it as self-administered anesthesia. Yeah. Well, if you take away the pain, you don't need the anesthesia.
Yeah, yes. That's
and so the whole idea of doing these processes is to let go of the pain so we don't need to self-anesthetize and we can be more present.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that might be a good point. I think we've got people intrigued, Jerry, as to what we're going to do. So let's take a little break here and we'll reassemble on the next video and actually start teaching them how this works, teach them the basic principles, and then eventually, of course, we'll show people how to do this for themselves. Okay, so we'll
Sounds
see
great, Keith. Thank you.
On the next video. Take care.
Okay.